and he gave her a quick lesson in it, and she went on, and he said, I felt as if I'd spent hours with her. And he gave her a quick lesson in it, and she went on, and he said, I felt as if I'd spent hours with her. The horses are from Ireland. Their uniformity in color is obvious to all of us who are watching. They're actually members of the British Army, these horses, and they were fed some extra rations last night to keep them alert. Anyone who has been around horses at all is suitably impressed not only by the great look of these horses, but by their calmness and their own innate sense of dignity.
They need to be strong as well, because it's 40 tons, the lead-lined coffin, so they have to be pretty tough with,
40 stones, right?
No, I mean the gun carriage as well.
Oh, I see.
And it had to have it pulled by those horses. Those 6 horses have to be really tough.
We tried to find some information about the coffin, and all we could find out was it was 40 stones, and it is lead-lined, and that's about all we know. These are the representatives of some 110 charities. The youngest following the procession is 5 years old, a little girl with cancer.
That's a wonderful touch, I think, Tina, to have these people there.
Yes, it's certainly something she would have wanted.
Former Prime Minister Heath.
Deputy Prime Minister Prescott.
We might want to mention it's an absolutely gorgeous September day. Temperature is expected to be about 68. Rain expected a little bit later on today, but that's hard to believe given the blue skies that exist right now.
Very much like the day of her wedding, Tina, which is a June day. I mean, it is so haunting in so many ways, you know, that this very procession route that we saw, a different kind of joyous celebration at that time. She was being introduced to the world and was captivating. A friend of Tina's by the name of Clive James has written in the special edition of the New Yorker said it was like seeing her for the first time in person was like watching the sun come up. She had that kind of beauty.
Yes, I mean, in fact, it's amazing really the way she's presided over 2 occasions, which have brought forth such an incredible, powerful show of emotionalism. The intense joy of that day and the intense grief of this day. Quite unprecedented.
Tom Corby is an author and has written about the royal family. He joins us now to give us his perspective on this incredible event.
An incredible event. I mean, she would have looked at this and said, is this for me? I'm bowled over by it. I'm completely bowled over. I mean, at the beginning of the week, who would have thought that this response?
Do you think the British people have even surprised themselves? I know I've read that in places.
I think they have. But I think a lot of people are also, maybe not grieving, but swept up by a great national occasion. And that's what it is. And that's what it's become. I think she, who was a lot more self-effacing than people imagine, would have preferred something quietly up in Northamptonshire, which is getting later on. But this, I've covered all Diana's engagements when I was a royal journalist. This is her last engagement. That's how I see it. And it moves me incredibly.
You know, the fact is that in her public career, beginning, I think, with her marriage, we always underestimated her. I mean that in a collective way. That people...
That's
that
Mohammed
Fayed, who is the father of Dodi Fayed, and he drove his son's black Range Rover here, we're told. He's been a controversial figure in this country for some time. He's been denied British citizenship and a passport. In the last 24 hours or so, the family's been very active in showing videotape from the hotel, from security cameras, talking about the relationship between the two, and personal details about an exchange of gifts. Dodi Fayed was buried immediately, obviously, because he's a Muslim. And his father has talked in the last 20 hours or so about going to the morgue to see his son, and said that he seemed to be at peace, and to see Diana as well.
And going to the Paris apartment and noting some of the gifts that Diana had in fact given Dodi, a pair of cufflinks that had belonged to Earl Spencer, a gold cigar clipper with a tag inscribed from Diana with love. And apparently Dodi Fayed had written a poem and had it inscribed on a silver plaque and left it for her under her pillow. Luciano Pavarotti.
Yes, he said he was just simply too moved by her death to perform here today.
And at first he wasn't even going to attend the funeral.
Right. He seems obviously terribly distraught. Let's go now to Buckingham Palace if we can. Jane Pauley is there, and we're told cars are beginning to move, Jane.
Well, as Robert Fox, who's with me now, said, the choreography seems to be beginning. There is much movement. What do you see happening, and what do you expect?
I expect the minor royals, so-called, immediate to the royal family, to start moving off for Westminster Abbey. And it's ironic, just as it will come down in the next few minutes, the Standard is flying at full extension now.
It became very quiet here all of a sudden, and I see people entering those automobiles.
They will be the ladies in waiting, they will be security officials, and the cars are literally or soundlessly gliding out. And so the royal family is on its way to probably an unbelievably testing day, testing in a way that none of them could have imagined.
When you say the minor royals, will they lead the way and the Queen would follow?
They will go, as the Spencers will go, just as a family closely involved. And that will be the role of Princes Andrew, Edward, the Princess Royal, Princess Anne. They are just family mourners at the moment in this.
We earlier saw the Rolls-Royce that bears the Queen's standard enter the palace yard, so the Queen is getting ready as well. Tom, I heard you talking about the wedding, and of course I'm sitting pretty much exactly where you and I were sitting for the occasion of the royal wedding, and thinking of the role of the Queen then as now is somewhere behind in terms of where the focus of the attention on today is her former daughter-in-law. And Robert Fox was reminding me that it's interesting that the sovereign, the Queen, is not today the chief mourner.
No, she is just a family member in this. And it's interesting that the focus will be on the four males and Lady Diana, as she will, to millions of our viewers still be, Lady Diana, Diana, Princess of Wales' two sisters, who have been incredibly moved, but I think that they have done a great deal. One of the cars is leaving, and I think it's Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, has gone out on his own.
Is it likely that the procession will follow quickly?
I think the rest will go, and then we will have what in military terms would be called, and they will the escort will come under command of Captain Richard Williams, a captain of the Prince of Wales Company of the Welsh Guards, and then the slow march of the cortege will take place to Westminster Abbey itself, followed, as we now know, by the three princes and Charles Althorp, Earl Spencer.
Jane, we're seeing Elton John come in now, and George Michael come in as well. Elton John will sing a song that he has rewritten, and he said last night that they'd had a row, but that they'd been reunited, Diana and Elton John, at the funeral for Versace, their common friends.
Copies of the song will be sold throughout London, and the proceeds will go to the Princess Diana's memorial fund that's been set up by Buckingham Palace. Apparently her favorite Elton John song was Your Song, not Candle in the Wind, but somehow Candle in the Wind seems extremely appropriate.
We're at Hyde Park Corner now as the cortege is making its way into the heart of the crowd here. The crowd is everywhere, obviously. And
since we'll try to refrain from speaking during the actual service itself, Tom, maybe we should give people watching back in the States, and for that matter all over the world, some kind of idea of what will take place during that service.
It'll be a traditional Anglican service with some added attractions, obviously. Elton John will be singing. You'll hear Tony Blair reading from Corinthians. There will be readings as well by Diana's two sisters. And the hymns will be sung by the BBC choir. What you'll see is a traditional, not entirely high Anglican service here today, but one that has a kind of popular motif to it. Wouldn't you agree, Andrew?
It's an interesting mishmash, both ecclesiastically and obviously socially, and in terms of the music and the hymns. A couple of the most patriotic hymns we have, some of the most patriotic music, Nimrod by Elgar, for example, and also, as you say, some pop music.
I don't think that at this venerable church there's ever been an assemblage quite like that.
No, not quite.
Well, it did see the coronation of William the Conqueror in 1066, which was quite an occasion. In fact, the beginning of British history, modern British history.
I understand that, but you don't think the rock stars of the time came to attend?
I'm sure.
It also saw the wedding of the Duchess of York.
We're looking at pictures of Henry Kissinger, excuse me for interrupting, along with his wife, Henry Kissinger, speaking very movingly of Diana.
They were very close. Actually, she counted on him. He would see her whenever he came to London, and they would talk about a lot of matters, both personal and political.
That's Winston Churchill, the grandson of the great Prime Minister.
Son of Pamela Harriman, the ambassador to Paris, who recently died also at the Ritz when she was swimming.
He's just walking past the tomb of the unknown soldier. A British warrior is all it says. The bones of a man who fought at the First World War.
We might want to point out as well, Tom, that family members have requested that their faces not be shot during the course of the service, so we will not be seeing, I think appropriately, the faces of Prince William and Prince Harry during the service, but just the faces of those who will be speaking.
It'll be difficult enough.
Andrew Roberts, tell us again the significance of actually going through the Wellington Arch.
Well, again, this is a massive break with precedent. Only sovereigns go through the Wellington Arch, and since it was built, nothing but that has been the rule, and now a non-sovereign, indeed legally, in legal terms, a non-royal, is going through. So, so quite another break with precedent, yeah.
To the beginning of the service, they seem to be, so far as we can tell, generally on schedule here. These are plans that are, under other circumstances, are worked out with military precision. They had only a week to work these out because there were no contingency plans, as we have said repeatedly. And there's the Prime Minister, Tony Blair, who has just taken office here, a young man, older than Diana, but in a way, generationally, he shared many of her ideas, and they had become close, Tina.
Yes, she found in him, you know, a compassionate and communicative man who she could talk to about what she felt could be her role. She was dying for a role, something that she could do that would really help the country without her having to sort of, in a way, conduct her own sort of guerrilla missions to do things on her own. She wanted to really be of use, and she believed that Tony Blair sympathized with that position, and she told him she wanted to be a sort of ambassador for the country and sent to trouble spots.
Tony Blair is downplaying this, Tom, but there's some speculation that a phone call to Balmoral Castle, a 15-minute conversation he had with Prince Charles, prompted the royal family to return to London a bit earlier than they had originally planned. Andrew, do you think that's true?
No, that sounds like pure speculation to me. The details will not be known for 30 years, the true details, and who can say what, who said what to whom in a telephone conversation. Neither side are leaking.
The actor Tam Conti is coming in behind Tony Blair as well, a confluence of her many interests once again, and we've commented on that on several occasions here.
Tony Blair and his wife Sherry have been compared to Bill and Hillary Clinton, Tina Brown. Fair comparison?
No, I think they're very unlike, really, actually. I don't think there is a great deal of resemblance between them. I mean, obviously, you know, both Tony Blair and President Clinton are very brilliant, and you know, their wives are women of great seriousness. But there isn't, I think they're more unalike than they are alike.
Tony Blair once played in a rock band himself. I mean, he was a young man who was very much of his time when he came up here, Mr. Attenborough.
Lord Attenborough now. Yeah.
Clive James, the TV critic who often used to give the princess advice about television appearances. He begged her not to do the BBC interview, as a matter of fact, but she took no notice of his advice.
She was another one that, he was another one that they had a close relationship, and then they had a falling out, and he wrote about that this week, but he said that he was utterly entranced by her. He described their relationship as being in cahoots. When she went to Japan, she asked what she could do that would be special, and he suggested that she learn a few phrases in Japanese. And that was enormously popular during her visit there, when she, in fact, did just that.
Reminds you of Jackie Kennedy speaking French on one of her official state visits.
James Hawley's at Buckingham Palace. We're told that Queen Elizabeth is about to depart, and there, in fact, we're seeing through the gates what we think, yes, that's the departure of Queen Anne, and Princess Anne. I believe that's Princess Anne with her under the hat.
You can see the Queen, and I'll invite Robert Fox to join me in recognizing people. I see Prince Philip, I think, because he's so
Princess
tall.
Royal, Princess Anne is there. It's the first time we've seen much of her, but this is absolutely unprecedented, that they're coming out
On foot.
to show themselves to the crowd on foot. It's a tremendous note of respect for Diana, amongst other things.
Of course, we're looking for Prince Charles.
Yes, I've
And
seen
the
him,
princess-
and
you
the,
have seen
and the
Charles?
princes are there. They are at the front, and they are coming out to salute, to pay their respects to this cortege as it comes down Constitution Hill, and it's on its way now.
Well, this is absolutely...
Again,
Unprecedented.
absolutely unprecedented, never been seen before quite like this.
And as no surprise, the focus today is on those two boys.
Yes. But
And
they're standing, Jane, like an ordinary family at a gate. This may be a countryside, a rural funeral in any of the villages in England that Diana might have come from, in Northamptonshire or whatever. They're just standing there as one of the families deeply involved in the grief of this terrible, terrible event.
the crowd is energized by this. Many, many cameras being raised over the heads of the crowd, but still it's very silent. Nobody is speaking.
One ripple of applause and then silence. Quite astonishing.
You wonder how those young boys were prepared for this moment. William is 15 years old, which is somewhere between boy and man, but...
Having two children who have just gone through that stage, it is just a terrible, terrible moment for boys and girls to lose their mother. At that stage of life, it really is, it is so poignant, and it really is now the focus of this procession. Really, what happens to the boys? It's what the Queen said, and she actually hit the right note with that. That's what the crowd have been talking about most of the morning. It's the boys, Diana and the boys now.
Well, as Tina Brown was describing earlier, the criticism that the family stayed up in Balmoral too long, neglecting the needs perhaps of her subjects. As Tina said, she was acting in her role as a grandmother, which would strike me as perhaps exactly what these boys' mother might have hoped somebody would do, treat them as boys who need family.
There's one word that drives the Queen's public life from the very beginning, from the war on, and it is duty. And whatever she did or didn't do, and this is where the criticism is unfair, in her own mind, the imperative would have been duty. Now, the thing is that they have broken with precedent. They are trying to be as warm and close to the boys as possible. They called in their nanny, extremely popular with them, Tiggy Legburg, who's been looking after them, comforting them since Tuesday, and she is going to be a very, very important figure in their family life, in their intimate circle now.
It's a little hard for me to see pictures. That was Princess Margaret, I believe, next to the Queen. And the Americans, of course, will recognize Sarah.
It is a great gathering in. For the moment,
can you help me, Robert, and if we can adjust our monitor and look?
Yes, the family group includes everybody, because as we know, Sarah, Duchess of York, was very, very close indeed to Diana, and in fact she said terribly sadly, I feel truly I have lost a sister this week. So thank goodness, a lot of the bitterness, a lot of the venom that there has been in the past about the do's and don'ts of the royals and the breakups of their marriage is being forgotten today.
Tom, we'll throw it back to you for the time being. I expect the cortege to be coming down Constitution Hill any time, so we'll be back here at this location at that moment.
Thank you, Jane. We're at Westminster Abbey. You're watching the cortege now as it continues its procession, and it is approaching very close to Buckingham Palace. This is wholly unexpected, and we can't only anticipate what may happen next year, Andrew.
How do you mean what may happen next year? This can't happen again. Until maybe the funeral of the Queen or the Queen Mother, we're not going to have anything like this, and even those might not quite equate.
Not in popular appeal, unfortunately.
I think it's interesting how as soon as the news of the death hit, people just moved instinctively to Buckingham Palace, as if they felt they had to be there, even though there was nobody home. And they waited simply as a gesture of solidarity.
This obviously is a gesture to the public as well. They're coming out and standing, and they're being so public and so exposed here and trying to, in some way, to show their association with this moment in this very public way.
I think a lot of them are thinking about their grandchildren, telling their grandchildren, and that's one of the reasons that they've brought so many young children as well.
I'm not sure it's a gesture to the public. I think it's a gesture to Diana, a public mark of respect for her.
Now we're coming down, Andrew, as you corrected me earlier, Constitution Hill, and we'll be approaching the palace shortly.
On the right-hand side, as she goes, are the beautiful and vast gardens of Buckingham Palace. You never really realise quite how big they are unless you fly over them.
There's a huge herbaceous border over the wall. Beautiful herbaceous border. Here's the standard.
The Royal Standard is still flying at full staff. There had been some talk that it would go to half staff, which again would be something completely unprecedented here.
The Union Jack flag instead will fly at half staff when the royal family leaves.
Right.
And it will fly half staff until midnight.
That's right, yes.
Correct. Expressions on those people's faces.
Interesting sign. Of course, people wonder how stoic Prince William and Prince Harry will be. They were quite stoic yesterday when they walked among the crowd.
But did you notice the shadows under their eyes?
Some of the largest cheers that we've had here at Westminster Abbey as people debus came for the Chelsea pensioners, who are the old veterans who fought in wars this century. The Chelsea Hospital was set up in the reign of King Charles II, 300 years ago.
Back at Westminster Abbey, there's some anticipation that Hillary Clinton is arriving. She is coming because of her strong personal association. And
Sure.
she's here as a representative of the president and of the American people as well. They did share some very intimate chats at the White House and a lot of common concerns about children especially.
Meeting for the
And
last
AIDS.
time in June at the White House when Princess Diana talked quite poignantly about her upcoming trip to Bosnia. They first met during the D-Day ceremonies, anniversary ceremonies. The president says he plans to watch the funeral, Tom, from his vacation spot at Martha's Vineyard, presumably with Chelsea as well.
Jane Pauley at Buckingham Palace.
Tom, the cortege is passing in front of the royal family even as we speak. The Queen has, for the first time, seen it pass along with Prince Charles and the Princes Harry and William. It's passing in front of their eyes immediately, even as I speak.
And the horses are at a very slow walk. Only the commanders of the escorts, I can see the busbies of the artillerymen of the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery. The officers salute the Queen, but the Queen and the royal family are absolutely still. They are a family paying respect.
And the reason I suspect that the pool camera is focusing on the cortege bearing the coffin carrying Diana's body is that the Queen had asked the media to be as respectful as possible of privacy. Though there we have a shot of the Queen, but not the boys. I think they were being very protective of Princes William and Harry
Well, we understand, Jane, at this very point that the princes and Earl Spencer are going to join the procession.
Earl Spencer being their uncle.
Being their
He
uncle.
is Diana's
and
younger brother, Charles.
the coffin is now passing right in front of us. It's going round the Victoria Memorial outside Buckingham Palace. We can see the trumpets of the white lilies and the white roses placed by the princes, Diana's sons.
Robert, when I was here 16 years ago, sitting at this very place, watching
Flowers
a
are being thrown
carriage
on the coffin
flowing
now,
by
Jane.
and Diana a bride, what a different moment we're witnessing today.
And the crowd is following, but it is absolutely silent. It is quite astonishing. Now, the royal family is moving back to board the cars. Now, we were told that the princes were going to join it, but I don't see them walking past our position. They may join the procession later on as it gets towards the end of the Mall. It is now entering the Mall,
If
the
they
Royal
joined
Avenue,
the
as it were.
procession now, Robert, how long a walk would that have been? That might have been excruciating.
I think it would be,
Would have been a
the rate it's
distance.
going at about 25 minutes minimum.
So maybe it's not likely that they would have marched the whole way.
No. There's something astonishing happening, that somebody spontaneously in the crowd is playing a bagpipe lament. It is very, very strange. In 30 years of journalism and covering public events in Britain, I've never seen anything like this.
I'm told that you can maybe make out an envelope atop the casket. Looks like maybe it's propped up on the flowers near the front, and it's addressed to Mummy. To Mummy. Tom?
As the cortege, as you say, around the Queen Victoria Monument and begins its long and final journey to Westminster Abbey. In 1992, there was that memorable speech by Queen Elizabeth in which she described it as the year having been an annus horribilis. Andrew and Fergie were separated. Anne and Mark Phillips were divorced. Diana and her true story was published. There was a fire at Windsor Castle. That was 5 years ago. We can only imagine what she must be thinking about this year. Here now, coming out of, I think this is St. James's, preparing to join behind the cortege. It's Charles, William and Harry, Earl Spencer. Prince Philip is there as well.
Andrew Roberts, this is a very brave move on the part of the princess, is it not?
It's the enduring image, just as you had with JFK's funeral, that picture of the young JFK Jr. saluting his father's coffin. This is, I think, what people will remember of this funeral.
Certainly the most heartbreaking sight.
And this is what they wanted, those two boys.
They would have personally requested this after seeing their mother's coffin on Friday.
Prince Charles has been, as the Princess of Wales was, absolutely adamant that they must always choose. They would not have pressure put on them as he did when he was young. They would choose, and as Andrew said, this would have been their decision and theirs alone.
bringing up the children was the one thing that the Prince and Princess never argued over.
They were united on that. It's part of being royal. You have to do these things.
The younger boys with their hands clasped in front of them, Earl Spencer and Prince Charles in the traditional male posture of the royal family, their hands clasped behind them. Are they close to their uncle, Earl Spencer, Lord Nelson? You know?
Quite close. You know, he lives in Cape Town now, so not as close as they might have been if he'd stayed here. They're much closer to Peter Phillips, who is the son of Princess Anne, who's about 19 now,
And a big athletic star in this country.
and a big athletic star, and he's someone they really like.
And then behind are representatives of Diana's favorite charities. So this will be an unusual procession, to say the very least. You'll have representatives of the homeless, AIDS organizations, and other organizations with which she was closely identified, marching just behind the former husband, her sons, and her brother. A rich mix of the many parts of her life, personal and otherwise.
Must be a huge solace to her sons to see how much the public loved her. You know, there's been so much controversy surrounding their mother, really, that now they have a very clear picture that she was adored.
At the same time, Tina, don't you think it might be a bit overwhelming for them? I almost felt sorry for them as the throngs of people reached out to them yesterday as they walked among the crowd.
I think it must be very, very confusing. I mean, you know, one minute she's, you know, a sort of rock star, the next minute she's a saint. You know, they saw her as their mother, who was always there for them, and all these roles colliding is a lot for these young boys to be dealing with.
Tom, all week long, people have been commenting on the striking resemblance between Diana and her eldest son, Prince William. Even the manner where he sort of shyly puts
Ducks
his head down.
Right. This might be a moment to recall the lines of the great British poet Auden. Stop all the clocks, cut off the telephone, prevent the dog from barking with a juicy bone, silence the pianos, and with muffled drum, bring on the coffin, let the mourners come. One road in London, so many intersections of life, all coming together. Behind the casket bearing the body of the beautiful 36-year-old princess, who had created an extra form of royalty, not only in this country, but around the world. Described in the last 24 hours or so by the Catholic Archbishop of Westminster as being like all of us, flawed but lovable. Lovable to a degree that not even she could have appreciated in her wildest imagination.
It reminds me of the description that Jane Austen gave to her heroine Emma, faultless in spite of all her faults.
Somewhat a surprise that Prince Philip has joined in. He married the Queen in 1947. He is 76 years old.
Yeah.
Tom Corby, are you surprised to see him there?
Totally surprised. An unexpected arrival, but they're a gesture of solidarity.
They've just celebrated their golden wedding anniversary.
November.
Right.
November.
Right.
In this very church in
Right.
November.
I remember vividly when they were married. That was another event that resonated around the world. I was
We had a day off school.
right, a child at the time. He had not the best relationship with her. They had an exchange of letters from time to time, and she had a whole different idea of royalty than he did.
Well, he's an old-fashioned type of royal, and she was the new type of royal. But he did some pretty radical things when he arrived too. Upset a lot of people when he arrived. Overturned all sorts of things.
We're going to go to back to Westminster now. I think we're about to see the sisters arriving of Diana. They will be participating in the ceremonies today as well. It's Lady Sarah McCorquodale and Lady Jane Fellows.
Interestingly enough, Tom, Sarah dated Prince Charles, and he was visiting Althorp back in 1977 for a shooting party, visiting Sarah. And at that point, he met Diana. She was snared by the younger sister, I guess.
She was 17 at the time.
In a field, in a plowed field.
Mrs. Stan Kidd, the mother of Princess Diana.
The one who left the family when she was just 6 to marry a Scottish cattleman. Very handsome woman. You can see where the Diana genes are.
She lives in Scotland now, but I understand, Tina, they do or did have a fairly close relationship. Is that correct?
Yes, she was always the first person that the princess phoned when she came back from abroad. Mrs. Stan Kidd has become very religious recently. She's a very devout Catholic. She lives deepest Scotland, the Hebrides, on an island.
In a novelty shop she runs with her husband.
What elegance. She was exactly 12 years younger than her husband when she married him. The same age difference as between Diana and Charles in this very church. It was the wedding of the year.
And in fact, I understand for that reason, since they did get divorced, Diana considered Westminster Abbey a bit of a bad luck venue.
Maybe, maybe. I think it was Charles who wanted St. Paul's.
Also, St. Paul's fits an extra 1,000 people. That's another important consideration when you're bringing along ambassadors and foreign royalty.
St. Paul's was where Winston Churchill's funeral was held.
That's correct, yes.
Wasn't it the last state funeral? Those poor kids.
Bring in the rib. Will Charles get to be king?
Well, it'll be a very short reign because the Queen is constitutionally very, very strong, very healthy lady. He wants to be king. He feels he's been trained to be king. It's his destiny. He could make a very good king, in my view.
Diana didn't think so, though, did she, Tina?
No, she said so, but in my opinion, she might well have changed her mind had she lived. He could make a very thoughtful and sensitive king. He does care in his own way.
She was rather wistful when she talked about him during your lunch, Tina, saying they would have made a great team. She could have been shaking hands till the cows came home.
Yeah, she regretted very much that they were not able to operate as that, and I think she was right. I think that together they would have been unstoppable if they could only have worked it out.
There are all the signs that they would have been unstoppable. He does tremendous work.
He's a very complex personality, sometimes quite a tortured personality, but it's a fascinating personality, and one, especially with his work with architecture and the Prince's Trust and so many other things. He's going to make a great king.
You talk to any kid that he...
That's the Queen now. We're told the Queen Mother is leaving Buckingham Palace now, who will be coming separately. She is a formidable force, obviously, in this country, and has been witness to so much triumph and tragedy in her own lifetime.
One of her earliest memories was when she was only about 8 years old, but she went in amongst the crowd at Buckingham Palace to watch the Victory in Europe celebrations in May 1945.
She and Diana were once very, very close, but their relationship became quite strained.
Well, as a mother, obviously, her first instincts, her first loyalties must be to her son, and so when that started to go wrong, of course, she was drawn in that direction.
I think there was an ambiguous relationship with Diana the last couple of years. But as she said yesterday, she respected her and admired her work. You can't help but respect and admire what Diana did. You've only got to watch her operating. It's a very, very moving sight.
Princess of Wales very much admired the Queen's professionalism at all times and strove to emulate her. You know, she saw how the Queen, even in the deepest heat, would have her bag and her pearls and her air that, you know, nothing could ruffle her, and she felt she wanted to be as professional as her, and she was. And I think the Queen did admire that in her, that she performed her job so brilliantly.
Prince Michael of Kent, Lord Frederick Windsor, Lady Gabriella Windsor, Princess Michael.
Lord Frederick's just about to go up to Cambridge, and the Princess told me how proud she was of that. He got there very much on his own intellect rather than through any connections.
An Eton boy.
Another Etonian, just like Prince William.
There seemed to be a belief that Prince William will find sanctuary at Eton, which is the great traditional school.
They haven't been protective of him, but they've looked after him. Harry has been much protected at Ludgrove.
He has a splendid housemaster at Eton called Andrew Gailey, who is probably one of the finest schoolmasters in Britain.
And he's doing really well. I just hope this won't put him back.
Already he's missing term for all of this, of course, so it will set him back academically
He was to have started school
last
past
Wednesday.
week.
On Wednesday, yes.
He'll also make a very good king.
A friend of Diana's described William to me as a typical inky-fingered Eton boy, and she meant that in the nicest way. In other words, he was just another student there.
He's very multi-talented. He paints and he does does things with metal, and he's also an academic.
He's also quite athletic. Excellent.
And athletic, too, yeah.
Soccer player and an excellent
Hockey.
swimmer, we're told.
Yeah, he's a wet bob. That's the expression.
His best friend is, in fact, the son of his father's best friend, Nicholas Soames, and he was at Eton with him.
The applause. Here's
It's worth noting, I think, that there's a lot of concern about security here, but the crowd is extraordinarily well behaved, not that you would expect it to be any other way. Respectful. It's been devoted to the idea of grieving publicly for Diana in the streets for a long, long time. Quiet as the cortege passes by. There were some strong expressions earlier in the week about Prince Charles and the royal family. None of that is being heard publicly here today, as you would not expect.
In some way, it was almost fortuitous that this terrible tragedy happened at a time when the royal family were all together in Balmoral, because it did enable them to have a time together of healing. Normally, they would have been in different parts of the globe.
There's the Kent.
We're going. We have about a half a mile left. We're turning into Parliament Street through the passage of the Horse Guards here, I think. Is that where we are now?
Yes, it has. That's the Horse Guards Arch.
Right.
Horse Guards was where the British Army was run from, really from the 16th century onwards. It's been the heart of the officer corps of the British Army and the Queen's personal guard.
And it is also the, believe it or not, the official entrance to Buckingham Palace, or to the Court of St. James.
As each car comes up, they're getting a sort of popularity clap. But,
That's so poignant. Sorry to interrupt.
Jane
you.
Pauley mentioned that earlier. There's a car that says Mummy.
I recall what Princess Diana wrote on her father's wreath 5 years ago. I think, is it only 5 years ago since I covered that funeral? To darling Daddy, I will love you always, Diana. And here, 5 years later.
Andrew and Sarah, Fergie, she's now.
Beatrice and
lovely now.
Eugenie, their two daughters. Can't believe how big they are now.
The princess was an enormous fan of Prince Andrew. She felt that he was really almost the best member of the royal family.
She admired all his good works and thought he didn't get enough attention, that he was underrated, as well as Princess Anne.
Yeah, she felt that their work was not paid enough attention to, and that almost too much was paid to her own.
She had an innate modesty, actually, I think.
He's a real star in the family. I mean, he was a military hero, Andrew.
Well, the Falklands, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
he was a helicopter pilot during the Falklands War.
Very perilous duty indeed.
Certainly diced with death one or two times. See how he holds the hand of the little girls. I mean, he still loves his daughters, obviously he does, and I think he loves his wife, too.
They have quite a friendly relationship, don't
Very,
they?
very good relationship, apparently, yes. Which is extraordinary considering all the things that they've gone through together.
The Queen now has left Buckingham Palace, and we're just going to watch here for a few moments as the family, the mourners gather at Westminster Abbey from around the world, and the cortege now makes its final approach to this ancient abbey.
It's a little older than 1,000 years old. They think 7th century was the first time that the Saxons built a place of worship here.
Edward the Confessor, wasn't it?
Edward the Confessor was 300 years later, and yes, he was...
It was when it was a Benedictine monastery?
It was, yes.
And Hyde Park was part of its grounds. The flag, here we go.
Now we see the Union Jack and half staff at Buckingham Palace, where Jane Pauley is located. Jane?
We've been waiting for this. The crowd just applauded. I'm sitting with Andrew Neil, the editor-in-chief of the European, was formerly editor of the Sunday Times.
Sunday Times of London.
And you, an anti-royalist, have been very anxious to watch that. What did you tell me? It was people power?
There are people, when that flag went up, the people applauded because the people had done that. If it had been left to the House of Windsor, you wouldn't be seeing that flag right now. The people put that flag there.
To an American audience, to see a nation's flag at half-mast is not a remarkable sight, but above Buckingham Palace in 1,000 years, that has never happened.
That has never happened in the history of the British monarchy, which, as you say, is 1,000 years. Tradition has always been that the Queen's flag or the King's flag flies, never at half-mast, represents the continuity of the nation, whoever lives or dies. That's protocol. Protocol doesn't matter with these people. This is the people's princess. These same people are about to try to turn this into a people's monarchy.
You're an anti-royalist.
No, I'm anti the House of Windsor. That's a different thing.
Ah,
I think the behavior of the House of Windsor, it's not really the day to dwell on this, but I think over the past 10 years, and particularly the treatment of Diana, have made reluctant Republicans of many British people.
But aren't you in a mood for reconciliation yourself after this extraordinary week?
I think that the Queen's broadcast last night, live, expressing emotions we've never heard from a British monarch, maybe not exceptional for an American president, but for a British monarch, very much so. I think this, if they can learn the lessons of this and learn the lessons of Diana, they might begin a new relationship with the British people.
All right, thank you. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you, Jane. Well, that's a dialogue that has been going on throughout this country and will continue, no doubt. Very strong feelings on both sides of the issue. You just saw passing by Queen Elizabeth and the Queen Mother, who are now approaching Westminster Abbey.
They're just going past the Cenotaph, which is the main war memorial built by Sir Edwin Lutyens after the First World War and commemorating those who died in the Second as well.
This is Her Majesty.
This place obviously has such rich meaning for Queen Elizabeth. It was here that she had her coronation in 1952 when she was a young and beautiful princess at the time who was on safari in Africa when her father died. And she returned immediately because she was the queen.
Every single coronation, apart from two, have been held here at Buckingham Palace. The two exceptions being those of Edward V and Edward VIII, who, of course, was never crowned.
39 altogether, I gather. The sovereigns were coronations here. It's so much different now. During her coronation, I remember the movie reels, you know, black and white, took days to get back to the theaters, and then people could watch them, but they poured into the theaters to watch it then.
And even in occupied Berlin, one cinema was standing. It was packed every night.
Right.
Incredible thing, that wedding. I mean, with 1947, rationing, fuel crisis, everyone freezing. It's a splash of colour in our rather dreary lives. She's on her stick, but she's walking.
Queen Mother is 97 years old.
Yeah. And she was married in Westminster Abbey also, and when she went by the tomb of the unknown soldier or warrior, she placed her wedding bouquet on that, and that set her style.
She was probably the most like Princess of Wales to anyone in the royal family in her extraordinarily communicative gifts, the way she had always the right gesture at the right time.
Exactly.
Her famous line was something like, "My, don't the flowers look lovely?" Didn't she say that at almost every occasion?
She was she's a great flower lady. But she was a wonderful queen consort. I remember when she went, I don't remember, but she went to France to build up our relations with France just before the First World War. And she laid a single red poppy on a war memorial. And Hitler was watching this in Berlin. And he turned around and said, "That is the most dangerous woman in Europe." Of course, she was the Queen of the Blitz.
She was also crowned here, of course,
yes,
with her husband, or at least her husband was crowned here in May 1937.
They stayed here during the Blitz, and then they would walk out immediately after the bombing had stopped and walk among the people.
And when Buckingham Palace was hit by bombs in September 1940, she said, "Now at last I can look the East End in the face."
That's right. And she went back there in her 90th birthday year, visit all the sites that she used to visit.
I once asked her what it felt like to be a Queen Empress, because of course she was the last one. She said it felt very nice while it lasted.
It didn't last very long.
Sadly not.
But when she used to go and visit the bomb sites, there was some unctuous official who complained about wearing her powder blue and her bits of feather. She used to be all feathers and frills when she was young. And her high heels. They said, "Well, why don't you wear something more suitable for the aftermath of an air raid?" And she turned around, she fixed him with her eyes and said, "Oh, they'd wear their best dresses if they were coming to see me." So after that, she was another unstoppable. I often think there was a great similarity between her and Diana.
Well, she had some of her gaiety, didn't she?
Yeah, some of her gaiety, her gift of communication, I think, was it in. She's a remarkable woman.
And a connection with the past, unlike any other.
During the services, presiding will be Most Reverend and Right Honorable Dr. George Carey, who is the Lord Archbishop of Canterbury, the primate of all England. He'll lead the prayers, and he's the one who greeted the Queen Mother when she arrived.
The music we'll hear during the service was selected by Diana's sisters, Jane and Sarah. Some of her favorite pieces of music will be played, including the very traditional English hymn, "Vow to Thee, My Country," which was also sung at her wedding.
That will be a very emotional moment. It's one of the great tear-jerking hymns of the English canon.
Andrew Roberts, the Spencer family, particularly Earl Spencer, played quite a pivotal role in the planning of this occasion, didn't he? He overruled the palace and disinvited, or said that tabloid editors would not be welcome here.
Certain tabloid editors did have their invitations withdrawn. I don't know if it's a question of overrule the palace. I think it's probably a decision that went down rather well with the palace. But there's a 25-man committee of the Lord Chamberlains who's been organising a lot of this, and so it was really them that he overruled. He, as the closest member of the family, and indeed the head of the Spencer family, he had automatically a great right to be consulted in every possible detail of the funeral.
Do you find it surprising that Prince Charles will not be speaking?
Not really. He is, after all, an ex-husband, not the brother of the person that all this is all about.
We want to, as the cortege approaches Westminster, we want to go to our colleagues now. Let's begin with Jody Applegate. Jody Applegate, who's just down in among the crowd here at Westminster Abbey. Jody?
Tom, the scene here in front of Westminster Abbey has changed considerably in the last half hour or so. The crowd has gotten so much thicker. In fact, there's a line of policemen behind me holding back the hundreds of people that we see just since I turned around in the last 10 seconds, coming apparently from Kensington Palace. It seems that a lot of people have decided to follow the cortege in their own way on foot, on side streets, and the crowd here just struggling to get a glimpse of Princess Diana's casket as we expect it to come by here any moment now. People have clung to lamp posts. There are women sitting on their husband's shoulders, little girls sitting on their father's shoulders. A family of 11 from Kent admitted to me that they swiped some milk crates from a grocery store so that they could stand here
Jody,
and get a glimpse of the funeral procession. Tom?
we're going to now watch as the cortege arrives at Westminster. The gun carriage, the Welsh guards, the children, the former husband, her father-in-law, and her brother immediately behind. Ted Hughes, the poet laureate who chronicles Britain's royal family, has written a special poem for this occasion. Ted Hughes, the poet laureate of the royal family, has written a special poem for this occasion. Mankind is many rivers that only want to run. Holy tragedy and loss makes the many one. Mankind is a holy, crowned mother and her son. For worship, for mourning. God is here, is gone. Love is broken on the cross. The flower on the gun. Diana, who said that she wanted to be queen in the hearts of the people, has achieved that status here today. We'll be joined during the course of this service by Flora Winfield, Reverend Flora Winfield, priest in the Anglican Church. She'll be helping us through the service, but I'll say at the outset, we're going to let the service unfold on its own. It is a mixture of traditional Anglican liturgy and services, and then some added personal touches, obviously. Reverend Flora Winfield, as you look at the services, this is something that is quite unlike anything you've seen before, or is it usual these days for the services to be combined with the personal wishes of the family and reflecting the life of the person who is?
Well, obviously this is not a typical Church of England funeral service, but I think there's been a real attempt sensitively to combine some sense of Princess Diana's personality, her vitality, her sense of love, and the fact that she minded so passionately about those who are marginalised, with the traditions of the Church of England, which is, of course, one of the family of Episcopal churches, like the Episcopalian Church in North America, which in a sense holds the grief of those who are bereaved. So that the dignity of the service in its traditional elements is as important to their grieving as the more personal parts, because it encapsulates and sums up the traditions of the Christian faith as they're offered in comfort to those who've lost someone very dear to them. And of course, at this service, we're mourning not only someone who is dear to a small group of people in a family, but to an entire nation. So it's a very unusual service, but it also contains elements of the Anglican tradition which have an important part to play.
Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip laying flowers, base of the casket, followed by Prince Charles, young Harry, and William. You'll see more in the Anglican Church in this country a making of the cross than you will in the Episcopal Church in America. That may confuse some of
We are gathered here in Westminster Abbey to give thanks for the life of Diana, Princess of Wales, to commend her soul to Almighty God, and to seek his comfort for all who mourn. We particularly pray for God's restoring peace and loving presence with her children, the Princes William and Harry, and all her family. In her life, Diana profoundly influenced this nation and the world. Although a princess, she was someone for whom, from afar, we dared to feel affection, and by whom we were all intrigued. She kept company with kings and queens, with princes and presidents. But especially we remember her humane concerns and how she met individuals and made them feel significant. In her death, she commands the sympathy of millions. Whatever our beliefs and faith, let us with thanksgiving remember her life and enjoyment of it. Let us rededicate to God the work of those many charities that she supported. Let us commit ourselves anew to caring for others. And let us offer to him and for his service our own mortality and vulnerability.
This is one of Diana's favorite hymns.
It was one of the hymns that she chose to sing at her wedding. And it's a hymn which has tremendous significance for people in this country, not just because it speaks about our national pride, but because in the second verse it looks to our home in heaven above.
Diana's sister, Lady
If
Sarah
I should
McCorkadale.
die and leave you here a while, Be not like others, sore undone, who keep long vigils by the silent dust, and weep. For my sake, turn again to life and smile, nerving thy heart and trembling hand to do something to comfort other hearts than thine. Complete these dear unfinished tasks of mine, and I, perchance, may therein comfort you.
Lynn Dawson, the soprano from the Requiem by Verdi.
This is Lady Jane Fellows doing a reading by Henry Van Dyke, an American clergyman who died in 1933, Princess Diana's other sister.
Time is too slow for those who wait, too swift for those who fear, too long for those who grieve, too short for those who rejoice. But for those who love, time is eternity.
Flora Winfield of Oxford University is with us. Tell us about this hymn.
This is a metrical version of the 23rd Psalm, of course, the psalm that's very often chosen for singing at funeral services. A version of the hymn which became very close to the hearts of the British people because it was sung at the wedding of our present Queen, the 23rd Psalm. It speaks of God's comfort to us and of our confidence in him leading us to green pastures through all the deep waters of death.
We'll be hearing now from the British Prime Minister. We should remind you that we will not be seeing pictures of the family during this service.
Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, and have not love, I am become as sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains and have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, and have not love, it profiteth me nothing. Love suffereth long and is kind. Love envieth not, love vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, doth not behave itself unseemly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil, rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in the truth. Beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. Love never faileth. But whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. When I was a child, I spake as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now, we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know even as also I am known. And now abideth faith, hope, love, these three. But the greatest of these is love.
Princess Diana's friend, the British Prime Minister, reading 1 Corinthians 13. Now, her other friend, Elton John.
Goodbye, England's rose. May you ever grow in our hearts. You are the grace that placed yourselves where lives were torn apart. You called out to our country and you whispered to those in pain. Now you belong to heaven and the stars spell out your name. And it seems to me you lived your life like a candle in the wind, never fading with the sunset when the rain set in. And your footsteps will always fall here along England's greenest hills. Your candles burned out long before your legend ever will. Loveliness we've lost, those empty days without your smile. This torch we'll always carry for our nation's golden child. Even though we try, the truth brings us to tears. All our words cannot express the joy you brought us through the years. And it seems to me you've lived your life like a candle in the wind, never fading with the sunset when the rain set in. And your footsteps will always fall here along England's greenest hills. Your candles burned out long before your legend ever will. Goodbye, England's rose. May you ever grow in our hearts. You were the grace that placed yourselves where lives were torn apart. Goodbye, English rose. from a country lost without your soul, who missed the wings of your compassion more than you will ever know. And it seems to me you've lived your life like a candle in the wind, never fading with the sunset when the rain set in. And your footsteps will always fall here along England's greenest hills. Your candles burned out long before your legend ever will.
The applause that you hear is outside of Westminster Abbey, obviously. People are hearing that and responding to Elton John, a friend of hers and one of the most popular performers in this country. It's the first spontaneous outburst that we've had during the course of the service.
It's almost as if the street is an extension of the church, Tom. It's been so quiet here. Earl Spencer, her brother, with a tribute.
I stand before you today, the representative of a family in grief, in a country in mourning, before a world in shock. We are all united, not only in our desire to pay our respects to Diana, but rather in our need to do so. For such was her extraordinary appeal that the tens of millions of people taking part in this service all over the world, via television and radio, who never actually met her, feel that they too lost someone close to them in the early hours of Sunday morning. It is a more remarkable tribute to Diana than I can ever hope to offer her today. Diana was the very essence of compassion, of duty, of style, of beauty. All over the world, she was a symbol of selfless humanity, a standard bearer for the rights of the truly downtrodden, a very British girl who transcended nationality, someone with a natural nobility who was classless, and who proved in the last year that she needed no royal title to continue to generate her particular brand of magic. Today is our chance to say thank you for the way you brightened our lives, even though God granted you but half a life. We will all feel cheated, always, that you were taken from us so young, and yet we must learn to be grateful that you came along at all. Only now you are gone do we truly appreciate what we are now without, and we want you to know that life without you is very, very difficult. We have all despaired at our loss over the past week, and only the strength of the message you gave us through your years of giving has afforded us the strength to move forward. There is a temptation to rush to canonize your memory. There is no need to do so. You stand tall enough as a human being of unique qualities, not to need to be seen as a saint. Indeed, to sanctify your memory would be to miss out on the very core of your being, your wonderfully mischievous sense of humor with a laugh that bent you double, your joy for life transmitted wherever you took your smile and the sparkle in those unforgettable eyes, your boundless energy which you could barely contain. But your greatest gift was your intuition, and it was a gift you used wisely. This is what underpinned all your other wonderful attributes. And if we look to analyze what it was about you that had such a wide appeal, we find it in your instinctive feel for what was really important in all our lives. Without your God-given sensitivity, we would be immersed in greater ignorance at the anguish of AIDS and HIV sufferers, the plight of the homeless, the isolation of lepers, the random destruction of landmines. Diana explained to me once that it was her innermost feelings of suffering that made it possible for her to connect with her constituency of the rejected. And here we come to another truth about her. For all the status, the glamour, the applause, Diana remained throughout a very insecure person at heart, almost childlike in her desire to do good for others so she could release herself from deep feelings of unworthiness, of which her eating disorders were merely a symptom. The world sensed this part of her character and cherished her for her vulnerability, whilst admiring her for her honesty. The last time I saw Diana was on July the 1st, her birthday, in London, when typically she was not taking time to celebrate her special day with friends, but was guest of honor at a fundraising charity evening. She sparkled, of course, but I would rather cherish the days I spent with her in March, when she came to visit me and my children in our home in South Africa. I am proud of the fact that, apart from when she was on public display meeting President Mandela, we managed to contrive to stop the ever-present paparazzi from getting a single picture of her. That meant a lot to her. These were days I will always treasure. It was as if we had been transported back to our childhood, when we spent such an enormous amount of time together, the two youngest in the family. Fundamentally, she hadn't changed at all from the big sister who mothered me as a baby, fought with me at school, and endured those long train journeys between our parents' homes with me at weekends. It is a tribute to her level-headedness and strength that despite the most bizarre life imaginable after her childhood, she remained intact, true to herself. There is no doubt that she was looking for a new direction in her life at this time. She talked endlessly of getting away from England, mainly because of the treatment that she received at the hands of the newspapers. I don't think she ever understood why her genuinely good intentions were sneered at by the media, why there appeared to be a permanent quest on their behalf to bring her down. It is baffling. My own and only explanation is that genuine goodness is threatening to those at the opposite end of the moral spectrum. It is a point to remember that of all the ironies about Diana, perhaps the greatest was this: a girl given the name of the ancient goddess of hunting was, in the end, the most hunted person of the modern age. She would want us today to pledge ourselves to protecting her beloved boys, William and Harry, from a similar fate. And I do this here, Diana, on your behalf. We will not allow them to suffer the anguish that used regularly to drive you to tearful despair. And beyond that, on behalf of your mother and sisters, I pledge that we, your blood family, will do all we can to continue the imaginative and loving way in which you are steering these two exceptional young men, so that their souls are not simply immersed by duty and tradition, but can sing openly as you planned. We fully respect the heritage into which they have both been born, and will always respect and encourage them in their royal role. But we, like you, recognize the need for them to experience as many different aspects of life as possible, to arm them spiritually and emotionally for the years ahead. I know you would have expected nothing less from us. William and Harry, we all care desperately for you today. We're all chewed up with sadness at the loss of a woman who wasn't even our mother. How great your suffering is, we cannot even imagine. I would like to end by thanking God for the small mercies he's shown us at this dreadful time, for taking Diana at her most beautiful and radiant, and when she had joy in her private life. Above all, we give thanks for the life of a woman I'm so proud to be able to call my sister, the unique, the complex, the extraordinary and irreplaceable Diana, whose beauty, both internal and external, will never be extinguished from our minds.
Earl Spencer, the brother of Diana, in a tribute that it was at once touching, loving, angry, emotional, and challenging. Challenging the royal family, challenging the press, challenging the world on his sister's behalf. And her legacy, saying, do not sanctify her memory, do not canonize her in advance. The applause that you hear is the applause from people outside Westminster in various places. They have broken to applause on several occasions. They're hearing all of this. You're not likely to see the likes of that again anywhere. positively by a hymn that begins, "Make me a channel of your peace."
Sebastian Temple, a version of the prayer of St. Francis. It's a hymn that's sung in schools a lot in Britain, so this is a hymn that children will be able to join in with.
As we approach the end of the services, we'll be hearing from the Most Reverend and Right Honorable Dr. George Carey, who is the Lord Archbishop of Canterbury.
We give thanks to God for Diana, Princess of Wales, for her sense of joy and for the way she gave so much to so many people. Lord, we thank you for Diana, whose life touched us all, and for all those memories of her that we treasure. We give thanks for those qualities and strength that endeared her to us, for her vulnerability, for her radiant and vibrant personality, for her ability to communicate warmth and compassion, for her ringing laugh, and above all, for her readiness to identify with those less fortunate in our nation and the world. Lord of the loving, hear our prayer. We pray for those most closely affected by her death, for Prince William and Prince Harry, who mourn the passing of their dearly loved mother, for her family, especially for her mother, her brother, and her sisters. Lord, we thank you for the precious gift of family life, for all human relationships, and for the strength we draw from one another. Have compassion on those for whom this parting brings particular pain and the deepest sense of loss. Casting their cares on you, may they know the gentleness of your presence and the consolation of your love. Lord, of the bereaved, hear our prayer. We pray for the members of the royal family, for wisdom and discernment as they discharged their responsibilities in the United Kingdom, the Commonwealth, and the world. Lord, we commend to you Elizabeth, our Queen, the members of the royal family, and all who exercise power and authority in our nation. Enrich them with your grace, that we may be governed with wisdom and godliness, so that in love for you and service to each other, we may each bring our gifts to serve the common good. Lord of the nations, hear our prayer. Diana was not alone in losing her young life tragically. We remember too her friend Dodi Fayed and his family, Henri Paul, and all for whom today's service rekindles memories of grief untimely born. Lord, in certain hope of the resurrection to eternal life, we commend to you all who have lost loved ones in tragic circumstances. Give them comfort, renew their faith, and strengthen them in the weeks and months ahead. Lord of the broken-hearted, hear our prayer. The Princess will be especially missed by the many charities with which she identified herself. We recall those precious images, the affectionate cuddle of children in hospital, her relationship with Mother Teresa, whose death we also remember today, that touch of the young man dying of AIDS, her compassion for those maimed through the evil of landmines, and many, many, many more. Lord, we pray for all who are weak, poor, and powerless in this country and throughout the world. The sick, among them Trevor Rees-Jones, the maimed, and all whose lives are damaged. We thank you for the way that Diana became a beacon of hope and a source of strength for so many. We commend to you all those charities that she supported. Strengthen the resolve of those who work for them to continue the good work begun with her. Lord of the suffering, hear our prayer. And now abideth faith, hope, love, these three. But the greatest of these is love. As we reflect on the Princess's compassion for others, we pray that we too may be inspired to serve as she served. Lord, we thank you for Diana's commitment to others. Give us the same compassion and commitment. Give us a steadfast heart, which no unworthy thought can drag down, an unconquered heart, which no tribulation can wear out, an upright heart, which no unworthy purpose can tempt aside. Grant us, O Lord, understanding to know you, diligence to seek you, wisdom to find you, and a faithfulness that may bring us to your eternal kingdom. Lord of the compassionate, hear our prayer. Therefore, confident in the love and mercy of God, holding
let us commend our sister Diana to the mercy of God, our Maker and Redeemer. Diana, our companion in faith and sister in Christ, we entrust you to God. Go forth from this world in the love of the Father who created you, in the mercy of Jesus Christ who died for you, in the power of the Holy Spirit who strengthens you. At one with all the faithful, living and departed, may you rest in peace and rise in glory, where grief and misery are banished, and light and joy evermore abide. Amen.
Hallelujah, may flights of angels sing thee to thy rest. Now, 1 minute of silence across the nation. Great chimes of Westminster Abbey now, as this at once solemn and emotional funeral comes to a conclusion. The body of Diana, Princess of Wales, was born from this ancient church, to be taken to the family estate north of London for burial on an island in a lake. 36 years of age, 16 years living intensely in the public spotlight. Now departing this place, the worldwide television audience of untold numbers. Ancient rituals, popular performers, and the people everywhere in London and throughout this nation expressing their enormous sense of grief and mourning for their princess. We have never seen anything quite like it. been such a flood tide of images this past week that it's hard to, in fact, in some way, to keep track of all of them in our own minds. And there was so much to remember from this funeral service today, but what was distinctly unforgettable was the tribute from Lord Eltrop, now Earl Spencer, to his sister. I don't remember ever in any funeral setting anywhere such an emotionally charged tribute to her.
It was stunning,
Such
Tom.
love, such emotion, such anger, so many challenges, such passion about his sister and about the life in many ways that he was obviously forced to lead.
Such honesty, too. I mean, he obviously
You never hear that at funerals.
spoke
Really.
his mind about a variety of things, and I think all of us sitting here listening to it were quite stunned, because I think in addition to the pageantry and the grandeur and the traditions that were shown here today, his words will resonate for some time to come.
They will, and they were perfectly weighed as well. He obviously given a great deal of thought about everyone and the effect that everyone would have, and it was beautiful, fine English, as well as heartfelt thought.
Tina, were you surprised that he made such a direct challenge to the royal family about the way in which the children will be raised, saying the blood family will be sure, after all, Charles is their father?
Well, I was stunned by all of it, really. I mean, the way he had made the obvious decision he was going to dispense with all euphemism, and most funerals are comprised of euphemisms. It's about, you know, tactfully forgetting everything that was amiss. And he decided to raise all of it and expressed it with such clarity and conviction that it has given everyone a great deal to think about. It was not just surprising, it was stunning.
You know, the fact is that in the press coverage all this week, there has been this kind of canonization of Diana, and much of it in the sanctification of her memory, which he asked people not to do today, and he talked openly about her eating disorders, about her own sense of insecurity, and that's why she acted out. I really did not think that we would not just see this at this funeral, but any member certainly of her family that would raise it in this fashion at this point.
It was extraordinary. I mean, there's no question it was extraordinary, and I think very uncomfortable, really, for many of the royal family in the church. You know, they must be on the cross as it is, and to hear that must have been deeply disturbing, really, because, you know, everybody knew why she had been as unhappy as she was. You know, I think it was courageous of him, really. I mean, he decided to say what he felt and would not be hushed up, as I think he would expect her to do herself. I mean, that was what she was all about. She said what was on her mind, and that's why she communicated so brilliantly with, you know, this nation.
Do you think there will be a struggle now between the royal family and the Spencers about the raising of William and Harry?
I don't think so, actually, because I think, you know, I think Prince Charles is devoted to his children. I don't think that he and the Princess of Wales really had any disagreements about how the boys were going to be raised. I mean, they have this wonderful woman, Tiggy Legbook, who's the nanny, who, you know, is a very consoling big sister figure, and I think that she will bring a great deal of empathy to the situation.
The burial services at the estate will be very private. Just 10 members of the family, the immediate family, will be there for that.
That's right.
It is out on that island, right?
William, Harry, Prince Charles, Lady Sarah, Lady Jane, Diana's sisters, Earl Spencer, who delivered that unbelievable tribute, her mother, Frances Shan Kidd, her butler, Paul Burrell, and Sarah and Jane's husbands will be at the burial.
It was her butler, Paul Burrell, who went to Paris to retrieve her clothes, and also sat by her in the morgue.
Queen Noor of Jordan. The BBC noted earlier, it was 15 years ago today that Princess Diana went to Monaco for Princess Grace's funeral.
We're going to go now, Katie, to Jane Pauley, who's at Buckingham Palace, where she has been from the beginning. And we have commented on this today, Jane and I have. It was 16 years ago that we were at that very position, and a wholly different kind of procession was coming back to the palace. It was a carriage bearing Prince Charles and his new bride, Diana, Princess of Wales. The fairy tale wedding, even though there were undercurrents of difficulty. At that time, everyone hoped,
I can't hear what you're
with all
saying.
their heart and all of their mind, that this would be what this country and what the royal family and what Diana obviously wanted, which was a blissful union that would produce an heir. In fact, they did. William, an heir and a spare, as they say here, and Harry, 2 sons within a very short period of time, and then first the public murmurs of trouble in the marriage, and then the very public coming apart of that marriage, ending in divorce. Mrs. Clinton with Queen Noor, who was American-born, obviously.
The cricketer with his wife Jemima.
Jane Paula, you're at Buckingham Palace. Could everyone hear what was going on there, the crowd, as they were assembled and they're now watching the
Tom,
funeral
yes.
procession?
Yes, exactly what I was thinking, that this is a crowd, and a fairly young crowd, by the way, that heard it all, stood reverently listening, which makes me wonder what this enormous crowd of people will take from the experience that we've shared today. And Andrew Neil is sitting with me, the editor of The European. What do you think will be the long-term effect of Earl Spencer's remarks? He seemed to be speaking directly as not just to make a tribute to his sister, but perhaps to inspire people by her legacy of so-called unworthiness, as if the unworthy, the people who feel unworthy, are the ones who will reach out and help. Service and commitment seems to be the bottom line that I was hearing.
Well, I think service and commitment was the leitmotif of what he was saying, reminiscent in many ways of some of the things that President Kennedy used to say to Americans. You know, that's not what your country can do for you. What can you do for your country? And I think Diana brought that back into the monarchy at a time when it seemed to be emphasizing its privileges and forgetting some of its responsibilities. The one thing you could never say about Diana was that she forgot that with privilege came great responsibility, especially for those less, more needy than we are. And we see now the car coming past us now.
Just passing us. After Kennedy's death, the Peace Corps was born. Do you, as you sat here listening today, were you thinking into the future if this generation of young people in particular might be permanently charged somehow by what they've experienced?
Well, I think the lesson of the past week, and we've only realized it as with Diana's death, which is the way of these things, that Diana made us think about the kind of country we could be, kind of country we might like to be. I was up at Kensington Palace 2 nights ago. This was a rainbow alliance of people there. There were blacks and Asians, poor people, middle-class people, rich people, brought us together. I mean, in the Abbey today, we had the Earl Spencer, Diana's brother. We had Elton John from a council house, a public house in Watford. We had a soprano. We had a gay singer. We had disabled people. We had all the people that we sometimes forget, and I think Diana set a yardstick that this country will now start to judge itself from. We've been the way we'd like to be here today, particularly all these young people. In the years to come, we will think, well, are we as good now as we were that day? That's the judgment, that's the call.
When the Reverend made the remark about and how Diana touched people and made them feel significant, the people that she touched, whether it was a leper or one of the poignant letters left by the gate was from a child who said, "You touched my face when I was a baby." She did make people feel special and significant, but the people we're talking about are not the high and mighty, not the royals, not the aristocrats, not even the newspaper editors.
No, she reached out to people in a way that no modern monarch or no part of the royal family ever has done before. I mean, Prince Charles does many wonderful works. He runs the Prince's Trust, which helps inner city kids and the ghettos and so on. But he never quite reached to people. You see, she has set a new standard for a modern monarchy. If it's to survive in a democratic and much more open in a media age, the lesson is that you cannot be cold, remote, seem to be indifferent if you want to succeed or survive as a monarchy. You've got to touch the monarchy, the people, in the ways that the House of Windsor have yet to develop and yet to devise. This is a new start for them.
Let's bring this back into perspective. Are we speaking in hyperbole now?
Well, I don't think we would be human if we weren't right now.
Yes.
But I can say that Charles Althorp, in his very powerful, quite blunt address in some ways, not what you normally get at these sort of ceremonies, particularly funerals, spoke about William in 2 ways. One, a warning to the press. You're saying right now to the press, you're going to be well behaved and so on. Well, your test on that will be how you treat William.
Well, what about it?
Well, I think he's done a perfectly proper yardstick.
Mr. Editor, what about it?
Well, I'm not one of the editors he had in mind. Though we're all guilty to some extent, including everybody here who buys the very papers that publish the sort of pictures he was talking about. And if we allow ourselves to treat to treat William the way Diana was treated, then I don't think the public will ever forgive us.
Tom, back to you.
All right, thank you very much, Jane Pauley, talking about one of the provocative issues obviously raised here when his tribute to Earl Spencer placed the press at one end of the moral spectrum and his sister at the other, Katie.
He was absolutely brutal in his assessment of the press. He said that he found the permanent quest on their behalf to bring her down baffling, and he said, "My own and only explanation is that genuine goodness is threatening to those at the opposite end of the moral spectrum." We're joined now by Jonathan Friedland, a columnist for The Guardian. Jonathan, what did you make of those remarks?
I think people probably were quite surprised how specific he was. I mean, there was no secret how angry Earl Spencer was over the press. His first remarks when he came out of his home in South Africa on the day of his sister's death said, "I always believed they would kill her," although I had no idea how direct their hand in her death would be. So I think people probably knew that's how he felt, but were expecting him to be perhaps euphemistic there in the Abbey on the day of her funeral, not to name names, and yet he did name names. He used the word paparazzi and then said the line you just quoted, very powerful, very effective, and very direct.
And I think it bears repeating that Earl Spencer disinvited the editors of the tabloids here in London.
That's right. A lot of people thought that was very deliberate because they were, in fact, invited first. They got the pleasure of an invitation. They probably got their wives or partners to get the hat out and the special dress and knew that they were on their way to a special occasion. And then he made a point of calling them round and saying, "You're on this list, or you were yesterday, you're not anymore, I don't want you there, and nor would my sister." So he made a point of rubbing their face in it.
I thought the juxtaposition of Queen Elizabeth shown bringing a handkerchief to her eyes during Elton John's special rendition of Candle in the Wind, and then Earl Spencer's remarks directed at the royal family was quite interesting, saying that Diana did not need a royal title to continue to dispense her particular brand of magic, or something to that effect.
That's right. I think that almost more than his points about the press is what really would have struck home. It was extraordinary, really an attack on the royal family there in a funeral, saying "we the blood family," drawing a distinction between the Spencers and the Windsors, who are, if you like, outsiders, and in terms of the grief that was being felt in there. And I almost got the sense he was saying that this week all this people's grief, he was marshalling that to his side, to the Spencer side, and saying, "You, the Windsors, are out of this." That whole debate which had been running all week, which a lot of people thought would be stilled in the funeral today, instead I think has been reignited by the strength of his remarks.
Jonathan, you had a memorable line earlier this week in one of your columns in which you said that if Prince Charles does not get this, he'll be burying not only the mother of his children, but his own future on Saturday at Westminster.
That's right. The feeling during the week was they just don't get it, to use an Americanism, that they were so out of touch, and that they needed to use today to prove that in some ways perhaps they did get it. They went some way toward that yesterday by doing the walkabout, by the Queen going on live television, by having these various human touches, these concessions to public opinion. So they had seemed to convey that. But I think, just as it turned around very quickly yesterday, maybe it turned around back again today. On a dime it turned, because the viewing audience weren't able, really, apart from the odd moment, to see the royal family, to see the Windsors grieving. Remember, no spoken contribution from Charles and the Queen, but they did hear Earl Spencer.
It's worth noting that the crowd erupted in applause following that specific remark.
And all of us here, and all of those specific remarks about the paparazzi, about how he would raise the family. Andrew, is this part of the emotion of the moment, that there will be some ebbing of that, do you think, in the weeks and months to come?
I think there's bound to be ebbing of that, and nothing can stay at this sort of level of emotion. I think that you're right in saying that it will be interesting to see how the royal family react. I'm not so excited by the way in which they were forced to show their grief publicly on Friday. I think that was very sad that they weren't able to show their grief in the way they wanted.
We are, the cortege now, the funeral procession now is about to pass by place where Dodi is married. Funeral services for him, obviously, were held in the Muslim tradition very swiftly within 24 hours here in London, and his father was forced to go to a traditional Muslim burial site and pick out a plot as he stood there with the casket bearing his son parked at the gate. It was a whirlwind romance. 5 weeks is all. They probably had known each other longer than that, but they began to be romantically involved in vacations in the Mediterranean. And according to spokesman for the Fayed family, they were very, very happy. And in fact, Diana is reported to have called one aide to Mohammed Al Fayed when she returned and said that we've all had a splendid time talking about the boys as well.
And according to many of Diana's friends who spoke with her about her relationship with Dodi Fayed, she was exceedingly happy, and many of them felt as if finally she had found some kind of peace and some kind of genuine affection in her personal life.
She was also, I think, having fun at last. I mean, you know, it wasn't a lot of fun, but she was allowed to have. And she was having fun in the end. She was having a holiday romance. I mean, I very much doubt it would have lasted very much longer than that. But at the time that she died, she'd had a wonderful holiday. She was with a man who adored her. He's very generous, Dodi Fayed, a very, you know, attentive, very courtly man who just wrapped her in attention. And she relished it, and she loved it, and she was having a ball.
There was a sense from some of her friends, Tom, that she was delighted that he liked her. And I think that harkens back to this insecurity and feelings of unworthiness that unfortunately seemed to plague her for much of her life, which I thought was, frankly, one of the most heartbreaking things about Earl Spencer's tribute, that this much revered, glamorous woman still felt unloved so much of the time.
But understandably, considering how she was treated much of the time, with close-ups on her legs to show cellulite, something that most women of her age would have far worse
But don't you think that Andrew was even deeper than that, deeper than the press coverage?
I think, of course, it was in that her marriage had broken down. But in this, I really don't think that we need to see this or should see this as a question of the Spencers versus the Windsors, because of one half sentence in that address. Because apart from anything else, what more could the Windsors have done other than today? I think they've been pretty splendid, really, in everything they've managed to pull off today. This has been a fantastically successful occasion, and the Windsors, specifically, of course, the two boys, have been the focal point of it. I think we ought to remember that.
I think it's absolutely right that today has been a remarkable occasion, and it did bring together that tradition and modernity just as everyone wanted. But it just simply isn't right and probably accurate to suggest that it was just a half line. It was the only moment of, in a way, real speech in the entire ceremony. The rest were existing hymns and readings, and it was several very direct and kind of barbed references from Earl Spencer. He obviously feels it very bitterly. To say we, the blood family, to say you don't have to be royal to retain a certain kind of magic, also to identify, again, using the specific language you very rarely hear in a funeral, eating disorders he talked about. He talked about her feeling of unworthiness, and everybody knows that the eating disorder was something she acquired, contracted in that period of breakdown of her marriage. So I think it probably shouldn't have been another round of Spencers versus Windsors, but it became one today.
You know, Tina, I think in many ways the overall impact of Earl Spencer's tribute to his sister was that he brought her back into a kind of human dimension for everybody again. And that was the greatest tribute that he could have done. And only a brother could do that, really, and do it in that fashion. Setting aside the dispute with the royal family and all the other things, he said, remember her for what she was.
Yeah, he evoked the complex, fascinating, multifaceted woman that she was. Her glamour, her style, her problems, her gifts, her extraordinary capacity for love. It was all there and delivered with this great direct passion. It was wonderful. I thought it was the most moving moment by far, really, of the day, because you saw her as a sister.
You know, the other thing is that I think that the fact is that there was such an attachment to her on the part of a lot of women around the world, and that there was that outpouring of grief. In fact, she did have those flaws and those frailties, and that she struggled through them publicly and acknowledged them. She talked about her own eating disorder, in public appearances. We want to go back now to our continuing coverage here of the funeral procession. Martin Fletcher, who has been brought in from the Middle East for us to cover this, is near the site of the mosque where the funeral services were held for Dodi Fayed. Martin?
Tom, it's quite fascinating here. The streets were almost empty until just a few moments ago when the ceremony ended in the Abbey. Now people are pouring into the streets, and the mosque where Dodi Fayed, where the ceremony was held for him. His ceremony, by the way, stands in stark contrast to Diana's ceremony, of course. It was a very simple Muslim ceremony. The people here are now waiting to see Diana's body. Very, very quiet, silent crowd, Tom.
Thank you very much, Martin Fletcher. This procession will take a couple of hours, we think. The funeral services ran a bit longer than we had anticipated. Everything had gone off with kind of traditional British military precision until the service itself. It ran over 15, 20 minutes. But it was so rich in so many ways, and the very nature of it, and this grand setting, the richness of the Anglican services, the choice of music, the people who were assembled there.
And the choral tradition, the beautiful singing that the Abbey choir came up with was in itself a superbly impressive aspect of the service.
You know, it strikes me as an American looking in on this, that in seeing this service and knowing the place of the monarchy and the royal family in it, and it's not something that you'll want to give up easily in this country, however people may feel about the place of the Windsors at the moment. This in some ways does reinforce what the meaning of all of this is for this country.
Well, we heard earlier on your program that Andrew Neil, the editor of a newspaper, claimed that he was in favour of monarchy but not the House of Windsor, to general hilarity here in the Bureau. But nevertheless, you simply can't at this stage have one without the other. This family has been, through its Hanoverian and Saxe-Coburg-Gotha manifestations, on the throne since 1688. Andrew Neil can't just decide after 300 and something years that he's going to swap them for another bunch.
I think that's probably true. You can't pick and choose, and a lot of people want William, for example, to succeed instead of Charles. Once you get down that kind of pick and choose route, then it really is, there's no difference between that and republicanism. But on the other hand, what Tom was talking about was ceremony, and people do love ceremony, and I would say that it is possible to retain those British traditions of ceremony even without monarchy. You know, I've been at 2 presidential inaugurations. They're not bad, and you could have a president or a head of state who doubles as a elected head of government and still keep some of this. This is part of our British tradition, but it doesn't have to be yoked to a head of state who's preordained by birth instead of chosen by the people.
But don't you think at this point in time, Jonathan, so many people are pinning their hopes on young William, that he'll be able to uphold the wonderful tradition and yet bring the best of Diana's qualities to bear?
That's certainly what people are really hoping for. He is the heir to the throne, but he is also the heir to Diana's legacy, and the fact that he looks so much like her, that he has that glance up through his fringe, just like she did.
It's almost like the House of Spencer, you know, and then it comes next. But I don't think that England wants to plunge itself into a constitutional, vacuum just because of the Queen's inability to emote. I mean, I think, nor should they.
No, I think there are plenty of good arguments for that, which are separate to the failings or flaws or even strengths of this particular family. And that argument has to be made and will be made over the next few years, even decades.
Well, let me ask you about that, Tina, about that very thing that you were just saying. It strikes me that I have a number of friends here or from here like you, and so many of them I find are conflicted on this very point. They struggle with this whole idea about whether it should be a Republican country again and whether the royal family really now is anachronistic, setting aside the idea of the Windsors here. Do you think that debate will be intensified as a result of all of this?
No, I mean, I think there is a real need for a royal family. I mean, in England, particularly in an age of such sort of transient, ephemeral celebrity, the monarchy does stand above that and stands aloof from that. Year after year, the monarchy stands for the dull continuum of people's lives, that's reassuring, in the fast pace in which we live. It suddenly spawned this extraordinary global star in Princess Diana, and of course that did show us a different kind of more, modern, more democratic, more appealing way of being royal. But you know, the Queen Mother had that kind of gift too. It's not only Diana. Every so often someone does arrive who has it. I think there is a strong possibility that Prince William may have it too. You know, she did say in June that she hoped he would grow up to be something like John F. Kennedy Jr., who'd been sort of schooled in the ways of being more communicative. And I think there's a strong possibility that may happen.
We want to go back now to some of the people who are assembled here. You did hear rounds of applause during Earl Spencer's tribute to his sister, the tribute that was so angry, so challenging in so many ways. Jody Applegate, however, is down in the crowd now with someone who felt quite strongly the other way. Jody?
That's right, Tom. Peter Champion is an off-duty London police officer, and I'm interested in getting your reaction to Earl Charles Spencer's remarks.
I thought it was inappropriate at the funeral. I can understand his anger, but I think that members of the press should be invited, because there needs to be a dialogue between the stars of this world and the well-to-do and the press, so there's a better understanding between them, so that perhaps we could avoid what happened to Diana.
Do you think it's fair to blame the newspaper editors, or do you think there's blame to go around?
Well, we all looked at the television, we've all watched television, we've all read newspapers. I think perhaps the proprietors could have shown more restraint in the past. But we are all responsible. We all read newspapers. You can't only blame the press.
Also, as we've been talking behind us, I don't know if you can see it, a giant flag has been unfurled that says Saint Diana, rest in peace, with a halo on top of it. And of course, the Earl Charles Spencer also said, please don't canonize my sister. She wasn't a saint. Do you think there's any danger that that's happening?
There is a danger, but I think it would be wrong. She was a privileged person, but she used her privilege to do good, to help people out, the people that are marginalized, who needed help. And she wasn't a saint. She had her problems. They were well known to all of us. And I think to make her a saint wouldn't be right.
As a police officer, I'm sure you've seen a lot of things over the years in this city. Have you ever seen anything quite like this?
No, I haven't. It's extraordinary. I've never seen anything like this in this country.
Why did you want to come down here today?
Well, I could have watched it on the television, but I wanted to come down here in person to pay my respects. I wasn't concerned whether I could see anything or not.
Right. And you certainly heard what happened inside the Abbey. Peter Champion, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. I know it's a difficult time. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Jody. The voice of the people, a voice that kind of strikes a middle theme, if you will. Let's go back down to the audience now, to the crowd that is assembled here at Westminster Abbey, and NBC's Kevin Tibbles. Kevin?
Tom, the Archbishop of Canterbury said a prayer to the Lord of the brokenhearted. I spent the service on the street with the brokenhearted, where people weren't self-conscious about the fact that they were weeping openly. Men, women, children, dare I say, police officers, even journalists were standing here, and no one was self-conscious about the fact it was dead silent in London this morning, and I've never heard it like that in all the time I've lived here. I'm standing with Lisa Fulton, who has traveled all the way down from Coventry in the north of England to be here. She followed the cortege as it came to Westminster Abbey, and I'm just wondering at this point, now that Diana has finally left, do you believe that she has actually left us?
No, it's very hard to believe.
What brought you down to here today from Coventry as opposed to watching this event on television where you could have seen it as opposed to being 15 back in a crowd?
My heart, I guess. I just had to come down to make myself feel better.
Were you surprised at the reaction of the people around you and the silence in the crowd?
Yeah, it was. I was at Kensington Palace, and as soon as the cortege started coming out, this coloured lady started crying out, "Diana, Diana," and it was like really moving, and everybody just started crying, and it was hard.
What are you and your friends going to do after this? Where are you going to go to console yourselves?
Well, we're going to drive back to Coventry now, but hopefully see on the M1, go past it, or...
Will you be visiting Althorpe?
Yes, we're all going on Tuesday. I had a bouquet, well, a heart-shaped bouquet made up with red roses and a ribbon with Diana across the front of it. So we're taking that there on Tuesday rather than all the flowers be taken away to wherever.
A day you're not going to forget.
No, never.
Lisa Fulton, thank you. Tom, back to you.
Thank you, Kevin. A lot of people are concerned in the village of Althorpe that they may be inundated with visitors in the first few weeks especially, and then they wonder what the lasting impression will be. The Spencer family is thinking about creating some kind of a memorial outside of the park, some place where the people can go to pay tribute to Diana on a continuing basis. Let's go to Buckingham Palace now and to NBC's Sarah James. And as we do that, we want to remind you that we're carried not just on NBC, but on MSNBC, on MSNBC.com, on the computer. Sarah James?
Tom, one of the things that strikes me here is the fact that even after the cortege has followed by for the second time, still how quiet it is. There are still thousands of people here. It's as if now this is over, they're not quite sure where they're supposed to go. We've talked to several of them about their reactions to the funeral, and I wanted to talk to some of them now. Jane, you were telling me about your thoughts. What was the most moving part of the funeral to you?
I think her brother's speech was very moving, both in that he touched on their own personal grief, but also how she affected everyone else around the world.
You said that you've found some media hypocrisy in following the story. What do you mean by that?
Well, one day she's being vilified by the press, and then the next day she's deified, and I just think the tragedy is that it takes her death, or it's taken her death, for people to realize what she meant, you know, and to get off all the negative focus.
Now, I also wanted to talk to you, Wendy. You went all the way down the route. Why was it so important to you to literally follow that casket?
Because she's someone who's touched so many lives. She's opened up doors for us and made it possible to understand the monarchy a bit better. And she's made the untouchables somewhat touchable to a certain degree.
Do you think that there is a message in Diana's funeral and in the outpouring of response for the royal family?
Well, yes, they have to open their doors and make it possible for William to become the people's king when he gets the chance, like his mother, to follow in the footsteps of his mother, sorry.
What was the most moving part of today's ceremony for you?
At the beginning of the procession outside Queen's Gate, when the coffin was entering into the park and the bells were tolling and everyone was completely silent and stoic, and it was very heart-wrenching.
Did that suddenly make it seem real?
Completely real. It was finally it.
I wanted to talk to one last person here. I'm not getting a chance to talk to everyone, but Rebecca, how old are you?
8.
And why did you want to come today?
Because I missed all the hard work that she had done for all the little children.
Will you miss Diana very much?
Yes.
Was today a really sad day to be here?
Yes.
All right, well, we'd like to thank all of you. This is just some of the sentiment that you're hearing today, and I think it's one of the reasons why it's been so quiet here. Everybody is here with their own reflections, their own thoughts about the passing of Diana. Katie?
Sarah James. Sarah, thank you so much. As we look at these pictures of the funeral cortege, we should mention that it is approaching the M1, which will lead it on its 77-mile route to Northamptonshire, where the Althorp House, which is called Althorp in this country.
Yes, but spelt Althorp.
Right.
Yes, it's the stately home of the Spencer family. They've been major landowners there since the mid-16th century. And the family vault, which we've been hearing about, has contained dozens of generations of this family. She will be the first significant figure not to be buried there, but on her own plot, as Tina was mentioning earlier.
The Queen has returned to the palace, we should mention, and the Spencer family, and as well as Prince Charles, are taking the train up to Northamptonshire for her burial.
Yes, this is quite reminiscent of Churchill's funeral, where the family and indeed the body took the train to Blenheim Palace, or at least the village church nearby.
It was interesting. I don't think you can underestimate the level of vitriol that has been expressed toward the press in general, tabloid or mainstream, in this country and really throughout the world. We got into a taxi and we tried to give the taxi driver a generous tip for transporting us, and he said he gave the receipt for only the amount of the fare and said, "I don't want your money." There's a lot of anger towards everyone who works in the business.
There really is. People haven't discriminated at all. You know, on the very first day when people started gathering outside the gates of Buckingham Palace, ordinary people who were taking their own snapshots for home were elbowed out the way as if they were perhaps members of the press corps, a kind of unofficial paparazzi, because they were just taking their own pictures. That is that level of ill feeling.
Well, I'm afraid that's the other side of the coin, because those of us in the press too often stereotype all manner of people. You know, we make collective judgments, and so they're making a collective judgment about us. Tina, she was a luminescent figure in the popular culture, obviously. She was larger than life. Who is there around that will step into that enormous void that has been created, or do you think that there will be a re-examination of the need for someone like Diana for People magazine or your old publication Vanity Fair, or for that matter the New Yorker, or for any number of publications, including the electronic press and all the magazine shows and so on? Is there anybody else out there?
There is nobody remotely approaching the Princess of Wales in the incredible blend of symbolism that she had. I mean, you know, the combination of the glamour and the royalty and the troubles and the goodness and modernity of her made her totally irreplaceable. It's very difficult, really, for the royal family today, because there's nothing they can put up, really, to distract from the enormous hole that she's left. People are going to have to get back to something far more quiet and humdrum again. And gradually her mystique will, I suppose, you know, fade in that really intimate sense. And people are going to have to get used to something else while they wait for William. And I think that the greatest pressure really is on him now.
All the discussion of the royal family this week reminded me of Henry Higgins in My Fair Lady saying, why can't a woman be more like a man? Why can't the royal family be more like Diana? Well, the fact of the matter is, the royal family is not Diana. And perhaps it's unfair to even ask the question.
It almost certainly is unfair, but I think this expectation that maybe the mystique will fade over time, there's an equal risk, I think, that actually the myth will get larger, and that the Diana legend will become actually larger than she was in life, that the flaws will get sort of airbrushed out by contemporary history, and that she'll be a bit of Marilyn Monroe, a bit of John F. Kennedy rolled into one, and the royal family will be pale by comparison.
The people who were at the funeral are now exiting Westminster Abbey, and I'm going to do a little directing from here, which is not uncharacteristic for me. And just ask our control room if we can't begin to share with our viewers through the camera some of the people who are coming from there, because it was so exceptional to see people who were going in, and I know that we only caught glimpses of a few of them as this funeral procession now approaches M1, which is the name of the highway here. We call ours I-95. It's M1 here. And there you are. You can look down into that crowd.
I see Tom Hanks actually coming from here, or did.
All the men dressed in black ties and white shirts, the official wardrobe of the morning here. And
Victoria Mather covers the royal family, Tom, here in London, and has been very outspoken in the last week about the royal family. And I'm curious, I know that she'll be speaking her mind again today. I'm curious what she thinks of Earl Spencer's tribute to Princess Diana. Victoria?
Katie.
What did you think of the tribute? I mean, and were you surprised by it?
I was quite surprised about how bold it was, how courageous it was. I think everything has changed from now on. I think everything's changed for the monarchy, and I think everything's changed for the press and the relationship between the press and royalty and celebrity. But tomorrow, what we shall see in the papers is just one word, which is mummy. People may have lost their princess, and the world may have lost a living legend, but two boys have lost their mummy. And that was the little note on the cushion of white roses on the front of the Princess of Wales's coffin. Mummy, in Prince Harry's childish hand. And that, more than anything else, will perhaps protect the boys for a little time. But Earl Spencer was angry, very angry, and he was not afraid to show his anger. He was not afraid to show his emotions. And I think perhaps what the royal family has learnt during this traumatic week is that the showing of emotions is a good thing. They can't change overnight. We saw yesterday Prince Philip taking the flowers from people in the crowd, and instead of placing them rather tenderly on the ever-growing pile in front of the palace. He was sort of throwing them down. He didn't really quite know what to do, but he chose to walk behind the casket today, and the royal family chose to come out and to salute the coffin. As the Princess of Wales went past, the Queen bowed her head to Diana.
In fact, when Earl Spencer, I thought, quite poignantly addressed the boys and said something to the effect of, think of how we're feeling, and she isn't even our mother. We can only imagine the pain that you're enduring right now.
Yes, I think this was very sensitive of him, and throughout he referred to his sister's sensitivity, her style, her sparkle. But the most pointed remark of all was, not even when she lost her royal title. No, she needed no royal title to continue her magic.
Andrew Morton has something to say, Andrew Roberts, rather, Andrews had something to say about that.
I think it's a little unfair to complain that the Duke of Edinburgh threw down flowers. The man is in his 70s, and so it's a little bit more difficult for him to bend down quite as far as the younger princes did. He didn't. I was watching the same pieces. He was not throwing down flowers in any sort of disgust. He was letting them drop when they were as close to the ground as he could have got them.
Well, I think that obviously, yes, one has to have respect for a man of 70 years old, but it is difficult for him to know what to do in those touchy-feely situations.
Victoria Mather, thanks very much for talking with us. We're joined now by Lord Geoffrey Archer, who was inside during the funeral service and can tell us a little bit about what went on in Westminster Abbey.
I think really what was probably the most remarkable moment in what I would call my political career, really, was that after Earl Spencer had finished the speech, the applause started in the crowd outside. The people at the back of the Abbey picked it up and joined in. Oh, really? And it moved through the Abbey. I had the very great privilege of sitting in the 6th row behind the cortege, so I was literally opposite the cortege, and it didn't reach us. It reached us in a sort of sweep, and it was a crowd-led reaction that the Abbey picked up and joined in. And that has been the case, as I've said to Tom before, all this week. The crowd, the people, and the People's Princess were led by the people once again.
Did the royal family pick up on that applause? I
confess to not being physically able to see them at that moment. I'm not avoiding that, I genuinely couldn't. But certainly all the people in the Spencer benches, as I say, I was one row behind the family, the immediate family. They picked it up, but none of us picked it up. That's the real point, until the crowd had led it.
Lord Archer, what was the reaction in the Abbey when Earl Spencer said, we, the Blood family, will raise William and Harry in the manner in which you wanted them to? Did the air go out of the Abbey in a manner of speaking?
Well, I felt all through that speech two things. One, he must have spent a very long time. I've had the privilege in my lifetime of helping with speeches with two prime ministers, Margaret Thatcher and John Major. So I know the amount of work that goes into not every sentence, Tom, every word.
Right.
He thought out every word, and I began to realize a third through, this was no casual speech. He'd made a political decision. He was going to make this speech come hell or high water. And it will be remembered, you see, Elton John had just finished singing, and I mentally thought, wow, that is nothing. I'm going to beat that a minute. And along came this young man and made a speech which must have shocked an old pro like you.
Well, I thought the other thing I was struck by was the construct of it, the dynamics of it, the way that it built. He talked in such a personal way about his sister at the beginning, yes, about her insecurities and about her eating disorders, and it was a touching, real portrait. And then you have this kind of crescendo beginning in which his anger then began, in almost a volcanic way, began to build. And I think Andrew made the remark earlier that it was extraordinarily well constructed, word for word, phrase for phrase, and the orchestration of it could not have been more brilliant.
But the amazing thing was, I also picked up, as a speechwriter and speaker, that he had a message to deliver, and once he delivered it, which was about 30 seconds from the end, he broke down.
Right.
The last 30 seconds, he fell apart because the message had been delivered. and the rest went back to the love for his sister. It was fascinating. I've got to deliver this message. And once he delivered it, did you notice he creaked and crumbled and nearly broke down?
Well, that's often the case, though, when people speak at funerals. They try to get through it, and then at the end, they break down.
What were you all saying to each other on the way out of the Abbey?
My wife said as we left, although I knew, Tom, you were waiting for me, my wife said, I just want to take as long to leave as I possibly can. You will remember in the original semesters, they suggested that it was going to be 45 minutes. It actually was 1 hour and 10 minutes, and I don't suppose I got out for another 20 minutes. You didn't want to leave. You knew you were present at an occasion the like of which you would never attend again in your life. You wanted it to go slowly, and you wanted to be there until the last moment. It was that remarkable.
Lord Jeffrey, we heard Victoria Mather say the enduring symbol of this day, in her view, would be those roses on top of Princess Diana's casket with the card that said "Mummy" from her son
that was
Harry.
Very remarkable.
Were you able to see the princes?
The princes, or the card?
No, the Prince William and Prince Harry.
Yes, we saw them both come in. We saw them walk with their father, the Prince of Wales, and place the flowers down. All of that was very moving. The whole family being there was very moving. And I think, as at the beginning of the week, I think I told you at the beginning of the week that when I heard at 4:10 in the morning on Sunday, woke my wife, her immediate sentence was those poor children. That was her first sentence, those poor children. And I think what's come through this week is these people out here, that's what they most care about. They adore William and Harry, and they won't let anybody stop them having the life they were right to.
In fairness to Prince Charles, any number of people that I've talked to this week who know him well also say, you know, he has that very cold public demeanor, but that he's a wonderful father, that he has a very strong relationship with them.
I have a story about that. I was having lunch privately with Princess Diana about, I think it was 6 or 8 weeks ago, and we were going through to the tiny dining room where we were dining together, passing lots of pictures, and I might say, incidentally, one with her with Mother Teresa, and what a sad piece of news that is. But one with Mandela, one with Mother Teresa, one with... but dozens of William and Harry, and the very latest William and Harry picture had just been framed. And she turned and looked at it and said, he's growing very tall, isn't he, Geoffrey? And I said, he certainly is, Mom. And she said, and you know which side of the family that comes from, don't you? But she then said, when I stopped laughing, she looked at me very firmly and said, and Charles is an outstanding father, and the children adore him.
Well, Jeffrey, we'll ask you to pause there because we want to go to the M1 now. The flowers are coming off the hearse. The serious part of the motorcade now is about to begin the 70-mile trip north to the family estate by motorcycle escort. There will be great crowds there as well. The burial service will be private, and we want to remind all of you in the United States who are just joining us now that we are here in London at 1 p.m., but in New York and across the country this